There's no doubt that Argentina is a football-mad country, but what if I was to tell you that the origins of that passion for the game stem from here in Scotland? You might think I'm mad, but the man seen as the father of football in the country was actually born here in Glasgow. So join us in this video as we look into why Scotland and Argentina have more of a footballing connection than just a rivalry with England. So welcome to Glasgow. We're off here to the south side of the city where in 1853 this story begins. So the street we've come to is called Eglinton Street. Now in those days it would have looked a lot different as it does now, but it was here that a man by the name of Alexander Watson Hutton was born. He was born in a city that had a booming industrial economy, so you can just imagine how these once busy streets were packed with people and life. So it's thought that it's just about behind me that is where Alexander Watson Hutton was born. And behind me now is simply a music venue. You'd never know. In the 1970s, most of the buildings in this area were demolished, leaving stories like Alexander's hidden in history. I mean, just walking around these streets on the south side, it's just truly bizarre that the founder of football in Argentina was born on these very streets. You would never expect when you talk about Messi, Maradona, that you could say it all stems from here in the south side of Glasgow. But Watson Hutton's time in Glasgow didn't last too long. He was orphaned at the age of just 5 through a series of family tragedies and ended up living in the capital, Edinburgh. It was here that he managed to receive an education and graduated from Edinburgh University in 1881. Following this, it was a career in teaching that took his interest. But it's worth noting that during the years that Alexander was living in Edinburgh, football at the time was really starting to boom across the country of Scotland. Queen's Park had been formed in 1867 and quickly followed by Glasgow Rangers being formed in 1872. Celtic weren't formed until 1888. Of course, the rules played by those clubs at the time represent a hugely different game to what we have today. But the buzz of this developing game was obviously in the air, so it's not surprising that Watson Hutton took an interest. But how on earth does this connect with football in Argentina? Well, in 1882, a small advert appeared in the Scotsman newspaper that read, "Headmaster wanted for the Scots School in Buenos Aires. Guaranteed salary £450 per annum." Alexander was offered the job, and in February 1882, he set sail for Buenos Aires. He would go on to spend 2 years at the Scots School. But at the time in Argentina, it was another British sport that was favoured by those in charge of the school: rugby. This is something reported to have increasingly frustrated the Scotsman, who was keen to promote the game of football to locals. In an interview with football magazine El Gráfico in 1933, Watson Hutton was asked about his early days in the country, and of course how the locals reacted to the game of football that he was slowly introducing to his pupils and the wider community. He said, "They called us the crazy English ones." But Watson Hutton also added that the locals weren't afraid to say that cricket had also been played there before this new sport. But football was evidently gaining popularity, and when Watson Hutton left the Scots School to establish his own, the Buenos Aires English High School, he put football at the heart of its sporting curriculum. In the following years, Watson Hutton also organised informal football matches in public parks across Buenos Aires with players composed of pupils from the school. These matches would catch the eye of both the Spanish-speaking residents of the city and an expanding group of British immigrants, many of whom were arriving to help build the country's railway network. Then, in 1891, a group of other British immigrants, including fellow Scot Alec Lamont, formed the inaugural Argentine Association Football League. However, after just one season, it failed to return. This was put down to organisational problems and a lack of a formal structure. This is evidently something that Watson Hutton noticed, as 2 years later, on the 21st of February 1893, he organised the first meeting of what he hoped would become an official and structured football body in the country. Also named Argentine Association Football League, its name would eventually change to the Argentine Football Association, AFA. But back in 1893 at this meeting, Watson Hutton was voted as president to take the organisation and its league forward. Shortly after, the organisation commenced its first official league season. this being composed of 5 teams founded by British immigrants. Lomas Athletic, Flores, Quilmes Rovers, who you might know as Quilmes in the present day, English High School, and Buenos Aires and Rosario Railway. But it was Lomas Athletic who would eventually take the first league title alongside 5 of the next 6 seasons before they slowly disappeared from the football scene. For Alexander, his legacy had been set in stone, and although he only held the presidency for a short time, his influence on the game hadn't ended. In 1900, the team formed from the structure in place at his school won their first league title after re-registering in the competitions 2 years prior. This would mark the beginning of a period of dominance in Argentine football that even big clubs such as Boca Juniors or River Plate would be envious of today. But interestingly, in 1901, the association banned teams from using the names of schools, so Buenos Aires English High School had to register a new name to play. To fit within the rules but still maintain its origins as a school team, the name Alumni was chosen. This would eventually be expanded to the Alumni Athletic Club. They would win 10 out of 11 league titles in a period where interest in the game was changing from one exclusively to British immigrants to be shared by the entire population of the country. Now, you really just can't keep me away from the terraces, especially when we're talking about football in Argentina. We've made it 20 minutes south of where we were beforehand in the video. This is Cathkin Park. It was one of the biggest stadiums in the early 20th century in Scotland. Now, it has been abandoned many years ago, but they've left some of the old terraces. And as you can see, it just goes essentially the whole way around here, where the stands would have been. And I don't see a more fitting place to talk about such an historic man when it comes to football in Scotland and thousands of miles away in Buenos Aires. And the impact that Watson Hutton had on football in Argentina cannot be overstated enough. The current president of the Argentine Football Association said after their famous World Cup victory in 2022, "Today's hero is Lionel Messi. Yesterday's was Maradona, but the real hero of football in Argentina was Alexander Watson Hutton." What he was saying there is essentially, without him laying the foundations, we may have never heard of names like Maradona and Messi. We may never have had clubs like River Plate, like Boca Juniors, like Ferro, like San Lorenzo, like Independiente. The list goes on. I know too many people in Argentina. I felt like I had to list about 50 clubs there to keep everyone happy, but you know what I mean. And interestingly as well, we may stop to ponder and think, this was the time in the late 19th century when there was a lot of sports being brought over to Argentina, loads of games starting to be played, sports like cricket, like rugby, like hockey. What happens if Watson Hutton had have been more into them and started an association for those sports and pushed those sports in the schools? Well, maybe we could be stood here talking about rugby in Argentina. As the years went by, Alexander would take more of a backseat in the development of football in the country. However, his son Arnold, born in Argentina, also took an interest in playing the game, and he had talent. He formed an important member of that dominant alumni team, even becoming top scorer in the 1910 season with 13 goals. He was also called up for the national team in its early years. From 1906 to 1913, he played 17 games and scored 6 goals, in the same shirt that legends like Maradona and Messi would later lift World Cups in. In 2023, Adidas even unveiled a special match ball to mark the 130th anniversary of the foundation of AFA and pay tribute to Watson Hutton in the process. And the Scottish FA even brought one of these balls back to the south side of Glasgow to show their respects. And I was just thinking while I was stood here, is it any surprise that there's a connection between Scotland and Argentina when it comes to football, more than just a rivalry with England? I mean, these are two countries that are absolutely mad for football, like we said. Because if you think about the top games in world football, especially at a club level, you think about the Old Firm, the atmosphere, the tension, the rivalry. But at the same time, you would put up there the Super Classico between Boca and River. So it's quite fitting, to be honest, that we can tell a story of how these two countries are linked together by football rather than just one rivalry with England. And it's worth noting that in 1950 there was even a film dedicated to Watson Hutton's life called School of Champions, which dramatises his involvement in creating the Buenos Aires school team.
¿No van al recreo?
No, señor, queríamos pedirle un favor.
¿De qué se trata?
Usted prometió enseñarnos un juego nuevo.
Estamos cansados de correr a las banderitas.
El fútbol.
Well, this has been another video from the Partido, and I have to say, what a video it's been to make. Now, I have to admit, it took a while to film down there in the south side of the city where Alexander Watson Hutton was from, but it was worth it, especially coming to a place like this. So as we always say here, this time from Cathkin Park here in Glasgow, nos vemos in the next video.